So we'll thank everyone for joining us today. It is Tuesday, February 15th, 2022, a little bit after 9 a.m., and you are at a Wausau Waterworks Commission special meeting. Thanks for joining us. I'll note that all of our commissioners are here in person. Thank you for joining us. The first item on our agenda is pre-registered citizens for matters appearing on the agenda and other public comment. Thanks to everyone who signed up to speak. I will just go through in the order in which I got them, or some people might have snuck in between. So, all right, Gary Gisselman, you're up first, please. Thank you. You'll get 3 minutes. I know you're a pro, but for everyone else, 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Gary Gisselman, 319 Park Avenue, Wausau, Wisconsin, 54403. This day, I call upon the Water Commission to take swift and decisive action in dealing with the PFAS problem in our water. The citizens of the city and others who use our drinking water depend on this Water Commission to provide the best and cleanest water possible. The statement, just good enough or it's good enough for now, is really not what we expect from the city leaders. If Wausau is to move forward in attracting people, families, employers, tourists, we have to show that we care about our people and that in one way providing clean water. We cannot be lax in our diligence to provide the best service to the citizens, and in this day it is clean water. And while I have the mic, I also would like to appeal to the Water Commission to think and act seriously with regard to lead pipes and the solar facilities at the new water facility. These discussions, I think, have been going on long enough, and I think the citizens are looking for action from this Water Commission, specifically with the PFAS in our problem today, in our water today, but also lead pipes and our solar facilities also need to be seriously thought about. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next up, I have Bruce Grau.
Hi, Bruce Grau, Poor People's Campaign. I live at 1115 North 10th Street in Wausau. I want to thank you for having this special meeting today. Being on an election day at 9 o'clock in the morning, it still makes it hard for working people to participate. But that said, I think your comments, your demeanor, and call to action today can have a very significant impact on the public's opinion of all of city government and its commitment to protecting us from industrial pollution. We need to hear that the contamination of our wells by forever chemicals poses a real threat to our public. We need to hear that you'll take actions that provide the best available protection possible against PFAS contamination, both now, in the short term and the long term, while also promptly addressing all other contaminants that continue to be uncovered in our environment. This will minimize the potential heavy burden and costs of medical treatment resulting from preventable water contamination. And lastly, we need to hear that you'll take actions to conduct meetings that are convenient for working families. These actions would prove consistent with the principles of environmental justice as adopted by the City Council last year and underscore the role of city government to support all of its citizens currently and in the future. Water, as you know, is life, and we have a right to clean water. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Dr. Robin Baker.
Good morning. I want to address the PFAS situation. It struck me because about a year ago, my husband and I did a remodel of our home, and one of our projects was to put in a whole house water filtration system. And that came about because I went to a site called ewg.org and ran a water test report on our zip code 54401, 3308 Springdale Avenue. And found that there were 11 contaminants that were far above what's recommended. Now, I understand you may use other standards, the EPA, DNR, but this company is unbiased and is very thorough in what they test. So when I saw that PFAS were becoming an issue, I went back and pulled that test from August of 2020. So there were 11 contaminants that were of concern, many of them carcinogenic. I ran that same report this morning, and now there are 12. So it isn't just PFAS. But this needs to be addressed for the safety of our community and for our children especially. As I understand it, we may be going to bottled water in some locations, especially for the children, and there are concerns with that as well. The plastics from our water bottles leach at least 38 chemicals, contaminants, some of them carcinogenic, and some of that water is simply bottled tap water. So we're kind of looking at the same thing. So I'm just here to address the urgency of this. The EPA has known about PFAS since 1998, and they still have not set any standards as far as I could find. So I know our DNR is looking into this, and I encourage that. Anyone in the public can look at environmentalworkinggroup.org to find what's actually happening in their water supply at any zip code. And the state of Wisconsin is a sorry sight for this right now. I thank you for your time and your attention.
Thank you. Next, I have Deborah Ryan.
Good morning. I'm Deborah Ryan, City Alder for the West Side, District 11. I am not on the Water Commission, but over the years and even back, I think back in 2014 or 2016, I have been advocating with the Water Commission about the lead lateral. Happen to own a house that's 101 years old. I had gone to Madison for 3 years, came back in 2009, and knew I had a lead lateral that was not replaced, and so I looked at other options of filtering the water, the city water. So since 2009, I've had a Berkey gravity water system. This is the travel size that for my family and my pets, we use this for drinking any water. And instead of, like for lead leaching in the water pipes, instead of running it and wasting gallons, I just let it pour it from the tap, let it filter for this. Through the Berkey, if you go online, the Berkey was designed to be an alternative water source for those that could not have water readily available due to, if something happened to the water plants or that you were out in the woods, so that you can use a pond, you can use a river, you can use a lake, put it in, and it comes out as drinking water. And when you look at the PFAS, it removes 99.9%. Now, I bought mine back in 2009, where it came with the filter, and it was $140. I know it's not that cheap nowadays, but I have seen on YouTube of people using stainless steel pots, and the bigger ones, say for families, or you could put one on the top and use the regular pot lid, and use the bottom to let it filter, and that it does have the filters in the inside. And the black filter is the one that has the charcoal in it that takes out the PFAS. So I do think the city council should be looking at ways to get filters, and for those that need something more affordable, there's ways of making it, like with stock pots. I guess I would prefer myself to encourage people with stainless steel instead of using out of 5-gallon buckets. But this is something that could be done and gravity-wise be used within a day. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Tom Killian.
Good morning, Tom Killian, 133 East Thomas Street, and also alderperson for District 3. Thank you for holding this meeting and for allowing public input today. I'd like to start with some of the topics that citizens had touched on already, and one of them is the government's disposition on whether this water is clean and safe to drink or how it can be used. I passed out some sheets that, unfortunately, due to the copy quality, may not be immediately legible, but it's on the Wausau Waterworks page on the city website under the PFAS frequently asked questions for businesses. And I would note that these are not my statements, nor are they the communities. They are the city governments, more specifically the Water Commission. So it says, what can I use the city of Wausau's water for in my business, office, or church? And it does point out that using it for flushing toilets, hand washing, and cleaning surfaces is perfectly fine, but it does go on then to suggest that foods like rice, oatmeal, soups, infant formula, coffee, tea, drinks made from powders or gelatin should use bottled water or water from a safe source to prepare these and similar food items. Another question goes on to say, what about beverages made with city water? And the Water Commission on that page, the answer is bottled beer, canned soda, and drinks that were not made with city water are safe to consume. Beverages made using city water should use an alternative source of water. So I think that we can find clarity in the formal written comments that the city government has already provided to its citizenry on its website, and we can forgo any confusion or inconsistency in other public messages. But I believe that based on this and many other things, including DHS's scientific literature that supports its guidance, and those studies involve human observations, it's on page 314 of their Cycle 11 PDF, they suggest different standards, and the DNR agrees, different than the EPA, which many would agree are grossly outdated at this point. So my constituents and residents, many of them have told me they would like an immediate interim solution. And I think what we can do is, one, use a mobile filtration unit at the plant as the primary objective. If that does not work out, then home filtering options for them, perhaps point of use, and we should use eligible federal funding, which includes ARPA. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandra Kelch.
Good morning. My name is Sandra Kelch. I live at 802 Augusta Avenue in Wausau, 54403. I am the executive director for the Community Outreach Task Force, and we serve mostly the most vulnerable in our community. And so when this issue came up, I understand that we're all working towards a solution for Wausau as a whole. However, in the interim, the clients that we serve, including my son who is disabled and low income, they can't afford the filtration systems that are presented here. And so I'm hoping that in your planning of long and short-term solutions, that you take care of all the residents in Wausau and make sure that everybody has access to safe water. Thank you.
Thank you. Doug Denny.
Hi, Doug Denny, 708 Fulton Street. Some good comments already, so I'll skip some of those technical ones. I agree with Bruce Grau on the meeting notice. We really we shouldn't let urgency trump getting good timing out there for these meetings. So I'll skip some of the technical. I think the process I want to talk a little bit about is the decision-making process and the discovery process. To paraphrase leadership expert Jocko Willink, the first report isn't always wrong, but the first report is not all the information you're going to need. So I trust the Water Commission here. We've got some of the best regulatory and legislative minds here. We've got technical experts who've run plants for years. Take some time, do the right thing. And I'll go back to what the mayor said, don't panic in the original announcement. Certainly, you don't need me to tell you to project a sense of urgency here and raise priority of discovery, but don't panic. We don't need unforced errors. Prioritize discovery. So what do the numbers mean? What do the experts say? Do we have weeks or months to decide this? Or do we need to make some major decisions today? I think we have time to take a breath and get this right over the next couple of days, couple of weeks. Should we prioritize speeding up the completion of the new wastewater treatment plant? We know the old plant can't handle it, the new might, or will. Can we drill test wells in different areas to discover if there's fresh water or potentially confirm that we've got the problem in the entire aquifer in the Wisconsin River Valley here? Can we buy water from neighboring cities? And is their water any better? I don't know if we know that yet. Can we prioritize wells? I think the report said we're 23 to 48. So potentially, can we pump at a higher rate from our lower contaminated than the higher and potentially average that risk down? So PFAS are a statewide emerging issue. So what is the state response? Again, I said we had some of the best legislative and regulatory minds here on the commission. So this body, I think, is the most likely to come up with solutions that satisfy regulatory and citizens' right to know and have clean water. So let's put our best minds to work. Thank you.
Thank you. And last up, I have Michael Dudzinski.
Mike Dudzinski, 2901 North 7th Street, in Forest Park Village, just down the hill from the water tower. Are you Scott? I talked with you yesterday. Is there a medical lab test that I can go to my doctor for and find out if I've got it in my system or not? I've been there since May. I drank well water for 50 years out in the town of Texas, but it is concern. If anyone knows if there's a lab test, I will contact my doctor. The other question I have is bottled water safe? Do you have to check each bottle with a test to see if it's got these contaminants in it? Is there a safe solution temporarily? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's all I had for public comment. Thank you, everyone, for showing up today. The next item on our agenda is item number 2, presentation and discussion on PFAS in city water. I think I'm going to kick us off, and we do have folks from the DNR and DHS online to address any questions that the commission might have. I know there was some concern that they wouldn't be able to address the council when and if we have a meeting. They guaranteed that they would be back too, so thank you to you folks. So what we have here in January, Wausau Water Works worked with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources and Department of Health Services to voluntarily test every well for PFAS. All 6 of those wells contained levels of PFAS that exceed the proposed DNR drinking water standard. So those levels range from 23 parts per trillion to 48 parts per trillion, depending on which well. So Wausau Water Works is not in violation of any drinking water standards or regulations. We also have 2 different PFAS health advisories we're tracking. The United States Environmental Protection Agency urges PFAS removal of 70 parts per trillion are found. The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources is advising and proposing a drinking water standard of 20 parts per trillion or less for municipal water. So both of these take into consideration exposure to PFAS over time. And many times I'm hearing it's a lifetime. The science is still unfolding about these emerging contaminants. So I asked Kyle Burton from the Department of Natural Resources and Dr. Sarah Yang from the Department of Health Services to be on hand to answer any questions that this body has about PFAS, what was found, what they are seeing in other communities, or whatever other questions you might have that they can answer. From a policy perspective, I would like us to talk through what we believe the public's expectations are when it comes to drinking water, what our options are if we decide to move ahead in the short term to provide water under the DNR DHS health advisory of 20 parts per trillion, and what policy actions that will take, and what that timeline looks like. So we've committed to providing safe drinking water for everyone, not some, but all. So while we're still trying to understand the health effects of PFAS, we need to be mindful that we are including the public in decisions that could affect their long-term health. So I don't know if Kyle or Dr. Yang would like to give any further discussion on what was found in Wausau's water specifically. I'd open it up for you.
Good morning, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. This is Kyle Burton from the DNR.
Yes, ma'am. Kyle Bird from the DNR. I can just give a brief description of the samples.
Thank you.
And the sample results. In January of 2022, we worked with Wausau water officials to complete some sampling at all of Wausau's 6 wells and the 2 entry points, which represent the finished water, the water that goes out to the public. The folks, Wausau, agreed to proactively do this sampling with really an intent to learn more about the quality of the water as it relates to PFAS and really be protective of public health, preparing to take the next steps, notifying people of the quality of the water. So those samples were taken in early January. Those results were shared with us at the department and DHS as soon as the results were received near the end of January. All 6 wells and the 2 entry points to the system or the finished water exceed the recommended drinking water standard of 20 parts per trillion for PFOA and PFOS combined. I think it was already stated that the wells do range from 23 parts per trillion to somewhere in the 30s for those 2 compounds, adding in additional compounds for additional recommended standards brought those numbers up a little bit. But the real important piece is they exceed those recommended standards, which for us raises concern and triggered, and for the folks at the water utility as well, raised concern and really brought us to this point of we need to notify the public of the quality of the water as it relates to PFAS and start moving forward to the steps we're taking now.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Yang, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, good morning. This is Dr. Yang, and I'm also joined by some of my colleagues at DHS. I think Kyle did a great job kind of giving the overview, and we're happy to help answer any specific health questions that the commission has.
Okay, thank you. Maybe, is there anything from staff that we need to cover before we get into the questions and discussion portion? Oh, yep.
I would like to point out to the public that, and just reiterate that the City of Wausau Water Works has and continues to meet all safe drinking water standards. We take direction from the DNR. They regulate water municipalities within the state of Wisconsin. At this time, we have had no direction or action items given to us to change our processes or how we're delivering water to the city. Should that change, we will immediately notify the public, and we will react to those changes at that time. But as of right now, we are providing water to the public, and we are also currently in the process of setting up a pilot and bench test for removal of PFAS. We haven't had direction from the DNR to do that, but we know that this is a concern to the residents, and we are looking at all options and the best short and long-term options that we can come up with to provide the safest water possible to the city residents, regardless if there's an adopted standard in the future or not. Wausau Water Works is committed to providing safe water to the residents, and we would like to reassure you that we are in the process of finding solutions for this. We will keep you informed as we work through these processes, and this discussion today with the commission is the start of that as well. So thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. Commissioners, would you like to discuss anything related to the discussion of the PFAS in city water? Okay, I'll go with Commissioner Robinson and then Commissioner Force.
Thank you. As you know, this has been an issue that we've had before the commission. To bring some perspective, in 2016, EPA established the health advisory level of 70 parts per trillion, and that's been driving the discussion. However, since then, states such as New Jersey, California, New Hampshire, Minnesota, Michigan, Massachusetts, and Vermont have all adopted standards for PFOA and PFAS at or below the recommended standards for the state of Wisconsin. The State of Wisconsin Natural Resources Board next Wednesday will be taking up the drinking water, groundwater, and surface water rules relative to the regulation of PFAS, which is based upon science, and we know that there is a growing body of science, and there's still some uncertainty relative to the health impacts. I think the issue before us as a commission is how will we responsibly act to the information that we have, and while we don't have prescribed standards in place at this time that we've exceeded, and the likelihood, quite honestly, given the legislature and their unwillingness to adopt policies and procedures and standards that are protective of human health and the environment, that we are likely not to have state standards until EPA takes action, which I think is unfortunate. There is a chance to impact the legislature and the Natural Resources Board next Wednesday and beyond, but based on discussions, it doesn't appear likely that Wisconsin will have a standard in place. But we know that there are impacts. We know that PFAS impact human health. They impact the immune system. They impact developmental issues, birth weights. They've been linked to cancer in liver and others. They bioaccumulate in the bodies, and they pose a lasting problem. And PFAS are everywhere. There are 5,000 plus compounds where PFAS. If you're interested, you can go to your doctor and ask for a blood serum test, and they can tell you where the PFAS are, but you can get PFAS through grilling of food, through your eating of fast food in the various containers, and the problem is it is everywhere. And while we have it in the water supply, I think we have an obligation to try to minimize that impact and reduce it to as low as possible. That's not the only source. So you do have the ability to go forward, and I think the issue before us today is what will we use, and we had Doug Dingy laid out a process. I would propose that we would look to the Superfund record or the evaluation process, that we look at short-term and long-term effectiveness, impact to human health and toxicity, the cost effectiveness, implementability, community acceptance as underlying guidelines on how we would proceed. But I think we should look at, can we accelerate construction of the treatment plant? This is, I think we have to, on a long-term basis, identify the source, but we need to, more importantly, in the short term, begin to look at how do we provide as quickly as possible a safe supply of water. Well, EPA has that standard of 70 parts per trillion. They're in the process of revising and revisiting that standard, and they may have a proposal this fall, proposed rules with the final rule next year, and I am quite confident, based on all the information that I've seen, that number will be significantly lower than 70 parts per trillion. So I think that we need to take action now to drive that, and I think we're fortunate if you can look upon that with the new water treatment facility coming online and the potential capability of that treatment facility to address this issue. but we need to look at ways of accelerating that process.
Thank you. Commissioner Force.
Yeah, I would agree with what John has said. My name is Jim Force, by the way. I've been on the commission for a number of years. I live at 515 Franklin and have lived there for over 50 years. I would like to ask Dr. Yang, if she's still on, the 20 parts. As we all know, if you've looked it up on Google, 1 trillion is a lot of numbers, and 20 is a very small part of that. I'm not in favor of anything in the water if we can help it, but I'd like to know why, what scientific reason is behind establishing 20 as the limit. I mean, why shouldn't it be 10? Why shouldn't it be 30? I don't know what the scientific basis or medical basis for 20 parts is. I don't know if there's an answer to that question. The other thing I'd like to ask the folks who are on the video feed today, my understanding is that PFAS, as John has mentioned, are everywhere, and we know that Rhinelander, Rib Mountain, La Crosse, Eau Claire, and probably most, if not all, of the communities in Wisconsin are facing this issue. Is there not a way of sharing information? I mean, we're going to talk about a lot of different possible solutions here without much understanding of what might work and what other communities might be doing that are finding success, if any of those activities are taking place. I don't know. Perhaps it's too early in the game. But I'd like to have some way of sharing information so that if Community X is using granular carbon and it seems to be working, I'd like to know that, and other information like that. So why 20, and is there a way of sharing information?
Okay, maybe we'll start with Dr. Yang on what's the scientific basis for that 20 parts per trillion.
Yes, this is Dr. Yang. Yeah, great question. So when we establish recommended groundwater standards, which in this case were used to also establish the recommended drinking water standards for PFAS, we look at the full body of scientific information. So we're looking to see what was available from EPA, from other state and federal agencies, and we also look to see what peer-reviewed scientific information is out there. Our evaluation determined that there was some newer information than what EPA looked at in 2016, looking at risk in unborn babies and breastfed infants. So the information we have right now is showing that the effects on development are pretty significant health effects when it comes to PFAS. And because PFAS acts differently in the bodies of research animals than it does in people, we use a model to estimate what the level that a research animal was exposed to, what would that be equivalent in humans? The model that EPA used in 2016 was estimating exposure to the pregnant mom, but there's some new information out there showing that the best way to model exposure is actually to estimate exposure in that baby. So the baby, the unborn baby, and then the breastfed baby. And so we used a study that used that modeling method to predict exposure, and that's how we got at the 20 compared to the 70, is to make sure that we're protecting that most sensitive population in the best way possible.
Okay. And then the second question, I don't know if that is for Kyle or for Dr. Yang, but is there information from other communities on what seems to be working for removing the PFAS?
Absolutely. Thank you. And the commissioner did a really nice job of listing out those other communities in the state of Wisconsin that we have been working closely with having similar PFAS issues as what we're seeing here in Wausau. The difference in those communities, though, is that not all of their sources were affected at levels over recommended standards. So they were able to eliminate sources and have the amount, still have capacity to serve water below recommended levels of PFAS. So they would turn off wells in clearer terms. They were able to shut well X off and still be able to operate their system with wells Z and Y and serve water that was below the levels. There are treatment systems on municipal systems in other states, none in the state of Wisconsin that I'm aware of at this time. So places like Woodbury, Minnesota recently completed a treatment system using granulated activated carbon for PFAS. I think that would be the most analogous situation to what we're dealing with here. They were in a situation where they weren't going to have enough capacity to serve water below the recommended levels there, so they were able to construct a whole new treatment plant. I don't think that's not analogous to what we're doing here in Wausau, because Wausau, I think, is a little further ahead. They're the proactive steps taken to work on the new treatment plant that's going to be in place later this year is, I think, put us ahead. But they're going just back to the treatment processes. There is anion exchange, like maybe being planned here in Wausau, plants out east. And the way to get that information, we at the DNR can help do that, but also in the professional community, Wausau employs some engineering firms to work on their current plant operations, the new plant, and really those drinking water professionals are able to gather that information from around their community and bring that to communities like Wausau who have questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions from yes, Commissioner Jean.
Am I on? Yeah, I'm Joe Jean. I previously did serve working with the city in similar capacity that Mr. Lindeman is in now. And we've had issues over the years, and I'm going to talk about one that we're still kind of dealing with under consent order by the EPA. But first I have a couple questions. I was not totally in tune what was going on because I was not in the city of Wausau when this kind of broke. I did see something on TV, and I just want to make sure that I got that information correctly. I got the impression that we could drink the water from Dr. Yang. Is that fair for me to say that's what I saw you say on TV? Or was that a...
Yeah, so we recommend that people reduce their exposure to the water. So we're not telling people to immediately stop drinking the water, but we know from studies in people that had been exposed to high levels of PFAS in their drinking water and then switched to an alternative source of water, that levels in your body will go down once you switch water sources. So, the sooner that people can start drinking water without high levels of PFAS, the better for overall health.
I'm going to ask one other question. With your studies, is that tied with a certain volume of water that's consumed by an individual or not? Because I thought...
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great question. So our recommended standards are based on protection of a young child, which assumes 1 liter of water a day, but that's equivalent to protecting all populations. So, we're talking the general amount of water people consume in a day. I think that average is thinking like 2 liters of water a day for an adult.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I have a question for the DNR, Mr. Burton. When you characterized the 20 standard, is that per individual PFAS element or is it an additive? Because I kind of got the impression it was individual.
We have, right now, the standard that is being proposed next week at the Natural Resources Board is for 2 PFAS compounds, PFOA and PFOS. And the sum of 20, either alone per contaminant or per analyte, or combined is the standard. So it's a combined standard. If you had 17 of PFOA and 4 of PFOS, we'd be at 21, and that would be exceeding. If we had 21 of PFOA and 0 PFOS, we would have 21, and that would be, we would consider that over the level. So, and just as a note, and not to, maybe complicate things, but we do have recommended standards going through the rulemaking process for additional PFAS compounds, and we do add 4 additional compounds to that combined standard. But I think for simplicity's sake, it makes sense to take a look at just those 2 compounds now, since they're the 2 compounds of concern right now in Wausau.
Thank you for that clarification. I thought, well, maybe I misheard you, but you clarified it very well. We are not under any orders at this point in time. Is that fair to say? Has there been any directives from your office or from the DNR?
That is fair to say when it comes to corrective actions. Because this is an unregulated contaminant, we as a state and an agency, we don't have the authority to require a corrective action. What we do, the authority we do have, and have been working with Wausau very closely and very cooperatively on, is the requiring of notification to the public of the quality of the water as it regards to PFAS.
Thank you. I just have a couple other comments.
Go ahead.
When we think about this, and I was really impressed with the folks that spoke today. They're on the same wavelength that I think we will eventually be, and hopefully will be, that we don't want to rush into doing something that causes an unexpected outcome. So we need to do this very, very carefully. Gary Gisselman brought up the discussion about the lead. We've been working on the lead service on our side, on the utility side, for, I would say, 20 to 25 years. And we want to see that be resolved in our community. And we have been proactive to that. It's been very difficult to get people motivated to take care of the private side, but I think in the end we will prevail and that will happen. There was another point I wanted to say, but I'll probably think of it later. But I do want to thank the people that spoke this morning. I thought very insightful. We just don't want to react to something and cause other issues. And it's possible we could do something with a quick fix, and there's no guarantee that they're going to deliver in the time frame that we'd all love to be at. I think we're blessed that we started this process at our new treatment facility back in 18 and 19 or whatever years it was, that to be ahead of this, and yet we're still struggling with it. So hopefully we'll be able to work that out today.
Thank you. Commissioner Robinson.
So I want to go back to Kyle's comment and just ask, Kyle, to the best of your knowledge, has any community left a impacted well in service in their water distribution system? Of those communities, Rylander, La Crosse, Madison, and others, or have they all taken those wells out of service?
In large part, they've taken those wells out of service. And now we can get a little bit nuanced here, because as I think Utility Director Lindeman would know, we measure the quality of our water at the finished water points, right? We want to know what's going out to the system. So going out to the customers after it's been treated and gone through all its processes. So there have been situations where communities were able to use a well that was impacted and blend it with water from other wells that haven't been impacted. And on the other side of that blending process, the water being served to the customers did not exceed recommended levels. So to accurately answer your question, there may be some systems that are using wells that are impacted, but the water, we're working with those systems to ensure that water to customers are below recommended levels.
A question for Eric, then to follow up. Eric, do we have the ability to tap into other communities' water supplies currently for blending purposes?
You know, we just can't get the volume, John, at this point, so, yeah.
Any other questions on this topic? We're still kind of discussing what's going on in our city water. Otherwise, I can move us along to the next item if that works for everyone. Actually, I did have a question. A citizen did ask a question about bottled water, if it was safe. Maybe that is best directed at Dr. Yang. What do you know about bottled water?
Yeah, so my understanding is that the FDA does have some standards for PFAS in bottled water. So I don't know what the exact number is that they have to meet, but if you go onto FDA's webpage and search for PFAS, there'll be some information over what bottled water companies are striving for. I think when you're looking at bottled water, you're going to want to look for one that's filtered, because then you know that it's being treated in some way, either reverse osmosis or filtered water, not something that says like bottled at the source, because then you don't really know what's in there.
Okay, thank you. All right, we are now, I'm going to move us along to item number 3, discussion and possible action on short-term PFAS removal options. Maybe I'll flip it over to you, Director Lindman, to kind of go over what you're seeing and then open it up for discussion from the commission.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. You know, kind of upon a request, we had taken a look and kind of brainstormed some options that could possibly be looked at, and then tried to determine the feasibility of those options for the commission to take a look at for immediate, and then also, you know, what would be the solution as the new treatment facility goes online. As you look at the plan scenarios going down, option 1 obviously is something that's already in progress. We're working to establish that pilot study and the bench testing, and this would be the fix once the treatment facility goes online, that we would have a determination of what we would need to best suit the community to reduce PFAS to the lowest possible level. So there will be options moving forward with that. It's not just going to be one option. And the engineers that we're working with, they're on the call today too. We will have presentations probably at the March meeting for that and what those options, what we're going to be doing, timelines, and then how those options will be presented to the commission for decisions. We looked at a few other scenarios. All of them have the challenges. Some of them, you know, the feasibility of them are extremely challenging, and at this point, I don't know that we could feasibly implement those options in, you know, a more timely, immediate manner that would affect the entire community and would be efficient and sustainable at this time. If anybody has any questions on the specifics on those, I think one of the ones that would be the last one, and that would be bringing in a full filtration system for the water that we're currently treating, and then distribute that. You know, for the public, when we start taking a look at drinking water, it's a fairly sophisticated process, right? I mean, we try to present it as simple as possible. When we start changing the chemistry of the water in any way, shape, or form, when we start distributing that within the distribution system, we have a corrosion control treatment that is out there, right, to keep the public safe from lead leaching into the water with our lead service lines. And when we disrupt that chemistry without proper testing, we could compromise that corrosion control treatment and put the public at more risk. And so that is very concerning when it comes to providing safe water. That is much more of a concern to us at this point. And I think that we have a direction that we're moving to create a solution and to reduce PFAS in the water. And I would like to see us continue to move that forward, keep the public and the commission informed so that they can make an educated decision on what the best interest of the utility and the citizens and the users is. So.
Commissioner Robinson.
So, Eric, how many gallons a day are we currently producing in our system?
So, what would you say on average, Scott? You want to?
4.5 million.
4.5.
So, and what's our reservoir capacity in the various?
Everywhere, probably about 5.5.
Is there any concern that as we, I'm looking at if we treat things at the plant, is there any concern and will we be evaluating the potential release of residual PFAS that may be in some of those structures?
There are some concerns. Reservoirs and mains, water mains in particular, could hold some of that. So we will be looking into, we will also be evaluating what effects that could have on our water mains and if we would have some residual release in the future.
Both at the treatment facility and the point of service, if you will?
Correct.
Yeah. And what's the schedule for the current plant to be up and operational?
Barring any further construction issues, items, equipment availability, plan is end of July, early August.
And is there any ability to accelerate that?
I don't believe at this time it would be feasible to accelerate the construction at the plant.
Commissioner Force.
Eric, you mentioned the pilot study. What is the timing on that? And will we have results in a month, 2 months, 3 months? What is your expectation?
I think once the bench testing begins, we'll have more details on this, but I would say our first test results within the next 2 to 3 months would be, I think, a reasonable expectation to have something to look at to see which of these, options to consider for the commission.
And switching direction here, we've been talking about what might take place at the treatment plant, and based on that pilot study, we know that a number, I have no idea what percentage, let's assume it's a majority, of our users are concerned about this and might be willing to install some kind of an in-home treatment device, similar to what Ms. Ryan talked about, or a granular filter. When we had the rain barrel program last spring, we credited individual users with on their water bill with what they spent for the rain barrel. You recall that?
Yes.
I mean, I don't know what the finances are here, but would we ever consider doing something similar if a user put in at $100 or $200 or $300? I have no idea what they cost these days. Some kind of in-home treatment device, maybe with an upper limit on the cost. Would we ever consider doing the same kind of thing that we did with the rain barrels? That is, a credit on the water bill.
I think that's certainly something that can be recommended. I mean, we'd have to look at a possible funding source for that, as well as, I know when we were looking at the rain barrels and stuff, we had to look at that as well, using user rates for certain things and stuff like that. If it were an ARPA option, then that would be a council decision, correct, Mayor?
Yep.
And so that could be an option on the table for you.
And just to finalize my discussion, it seems like there are two parts here. One is, what could we do at the treatment plant for a long-time permanent solution? That's going to take some time. There's going to be a budget issue associated with that. Meantime, we have a lot of folks who are concerned about the quality of their water and want to get PFAS out of their tap water as quickly and as effectively as they can. So they might be willing to avail themselves of some kind of an in-house treatment system, at least to address the problem immediately and maybe temporarily. But it seems like it's a bifurcated solution that we need to move forward with.
Yep. Commissioner Robinson.
So part of the federal infrastructure bill was setting aside $10 billion for PFAS remediation. What plans do we have right now to begin to look at that as a potential funding source. I know that there are issues relative to the final appropriation of it, but I know that I'm a member of Wisconsin Green Fire, and we've had discussions with Senator Baldwin's office about trying to get that money earmarked and directed toward treatment technologies on a statewide basis. And I know you've been in contact. What are the possibilities of us working with them is one option? A second option, I know that at the water program at UW-Milwaukee, they have some innovative processes that they're looking at relative to removal of PFAS. Rather than relying solely upon our engineers who have a limited exposure to PFAS and experience, is there any thought that we could open up that process to requests for proposals from other firms that might be able to bring some innovation in? I know that when Joe Gian and I were dealing with the Superfund site and the issue of obtaining a permit for the well to dewater, the DNR said they wouldn't grant it, and so we were looking for innovative solutions. So we went to the American Water Works conference and talked to a lot of consultants and came back with an idea that was innovative relative to a drip irrigation system to stabilize the plume. But there was some knowledge that we would not have gathered if we relied on traditional engineering firms. So given the fact that there are firms in California, there are firms in Massachusetts that are designing and starting ion exchange programs, granulated active carbon filtration systems. And we've got UW-Milwaukee and potential Ventscale. Can we open up that process to be more inclusive, to bring the best minds to the situation, understanding the need to do this quickly?
Yep. So I'll answer your funding question first. I haven't been in contact with the senator's office, and if you have your document for the Build Back Better plan that was passed, including the infrastructure, on page 237, they talk a little bit about this, a very little bit. So that money will flow through the states, and they're still developing some of that criteria. So we'll have to keep watching. Now, they're looking at long-term solutions. So if we find something that would work with our treatment facility, that could be a funding source. We could be reimbursed for that, assuming what we've done is appropriate and scientifically based, which leads me to your next comment about UW-Milwaukee. I have been in touch with the government relations person for UW-Milwaukee, asking about their research on nanoporous materials. It looks very promising. I'm going to be talking to them further about this, and maybe that's something to include. I'll include my notes for all of you folks too, and maybe they'll even attend a meeting. But it is one of those things where we would have to probably work alongside folks in state and federal government to ensure that that solution is meeting the scientific rigor of and expectations of the public. It's promising, but it's still new. I don't know if you have anything to add.
On the funding, yeah, we're, as the mayor said, been in contact with the DNR's office and trying to figure out when that funding might be available. I think that the city itself is in a really good position right now. We have an open Safe Drinking Water Act loan. And so the discussions that we had with them is they felt like a lot of that money would be principal forgiveness through that program. And so I guess the avenue that we would like to take would be that if we were able to access those funds at the time that they would provide us, that we'd do it through the loan program, but then they would state that it would be a forgivable loan as versus tacked on to the loan that we have to pay back. So that is an option that they did. They had no guarantees at this point, but that's an avenue that we're pursuing. I think your point on alternative solutions, I think absolutely we can move forward, have further discussions with those, along with direct communication at the same time with the DNR, and just to make sure, because obviously they're the approval authority on how we're going to move this forward on anything that we do. So.
Mr. Jean.
I was looking at the data set with the recent test results. I noticed that well 3 and 6 are some of the highest wells concentrations. I think 7 is in that same area. But 3 and 6 are under a consent order to run from the VOC timeframe. And if it would make sense and we could get by without those wells, I'd like to make a request to the EPA or whatever agency that we need to ask if we could take those offline temporarily until we, and not use that water. Right now, we're forced to use that water under that order. So it may give us some relief, but it won't be the total answer, but it may give you some relief in the short term.
Okay. Mr. Force?
And just for clarification, Joe, 3 is on the east side, correct? And all of our other wells are on the west side of the river? Okay.
Okay. Comments, questions?
A question for Mr. Grau and for Mr. Doug Denny. Your comments about the meeting time, I share that issue with you. What would be a suitable time of day? Normally, the commission meets from 1:30 until 2:30 or 3 on a weekday in the afternoon.
I think a consideration of working hours and childcare are two things.
What would be an ideal time for you?
Well, I'm retired, so that's why I'm here today. So I'm kind of with you.
Yes.
It's inconvenient compared to your schedule, but it's inconvenient to their schedule. And I think that's very crucial.
So are we talking about something after dinner
Probably.
in your mind?
Probably.
Doug?
Can you bring in pizza or something?
I want to thank you for the comments. I also want to make sure that we're sticking to our agenda item, and I would love to have feedback on meeting times from anybody that would like to give it to us also.
Thank you.
Yep. Short-term solutions, next 6 to 8 months, what are we thinking? What do we need to make a decision? Mr. Robinson?
You know, I am concerned about some of the short-term solutions because it creates a false sense of security in many cases. And, you know, I spent 17 years with the DNR and the Environmental Cleanup Program, and you'd put systems in place and people wouldn't change out filters. And that doesn't serve anybody well. So the problem with those in-house systems is there has to be a good understanding of how they operate, what the expectations is, how long, if you're using granulated activated carbon, what volume you're running through there. And if you look at how those are designed in systems, typically you've got 3 GAC tanks, a primary remover, a polisher, and then a standby, and then you're reversing it. So you've always got 2 forms of carbon filtration to make sure that the end product is safe. So I'm really cautious about investing in those short-term supplies. And I direct a question to Sarah, and I know that we don't know about the bioaccumulative effects, but ATSDR was looking at a 21 part per trillion for a child as sort of that the standard for PFOA and 14 for PFAS. What recommendations would you have for us to deal with the issue of children directly, and what would be on an interim basis? Do you have any recommendations on how we should address that issue?
So DHS recommends the 20 parts per trillion for all populations. That is the level that the data suggests is protective of all groups of people at this point in time. You know, in terms of timing, I guess I would like to point out, we don't know how long PFAS have been in the water at this level, right? So we don't know how much time we have left, I guess is one way to put it. So, you know, again, that's why we're encouraging people to take action now to reduce their exposure. Again, we're not telling everyone they have to immediately stop drinking their water, but if you can think of ways to switch, you know, maybe drink bottled water and, you know, half the day or something like that. Like, this is, you know, at this point in time, DHS feels that there is some health risk associated with this water, and so we encourage you guys to think through what options make the most sense.
Thank you. Yes, I'm going to take some time. Our council president is here, so without any objection, I'll allow her to speak.
Thank you. Thank you. Becky McElhaney, 4050 Ashland in Wausau, City Wausau water user and council president. I've gotten a lot of comments from the council members and things, and I wanted to avail myself today to hear. I guess, you know, it's a question and a concern. That statement that this is a health issue right now is what I'm hearing from residents. And I want you to know that the council members that have called me are very, very concerned, and that we don't have to move immediately with a short-term option is not something I'm hearing. So when DHS is saying that this is an immediate health concern, I think that we need to act. I know we don't want to act, you know, surreptitiously and just do whatever, but I don't think, you know, we don't know what to do, so we're not going to do anything is not something that is an option right now. You know, when I voted for this building of this major money that we put into that, I made the comment that I did that reluctantly because of the money, but that I felt that the local government has a very big responsibility of giving our residents clean water and clean water removal with the wastewater program. So I also want to say I'm kind of disappointed that when we're putting this much money into a system, and my question is, was this new system, this new multi-million-dollar system, did it have PFAS removal planned into the new plant?
It was considered during the design, which is the reason that we pointed towards an anion exchange for the final treatment. But initially, because there's no regulations on it, the plant itself and the media that we're using with that anion exchange wasn't part of the design. That's why we're going back to do the pilot study and take a look at that anion exchange and determine if that additional media is an option as well. But we also had planned space and options for emerging contaminants in the future. And so with the anticipation that this is not the only one we're going to see, you know, as years come up, we will probably have to expand that plant, account for additional treatment in the future. So at the current site, we have additional space for that in the future as well. So.
Okay.
Yep.
And my final comment is I hope this commission will understand how high the water bills are for all of our residents and how it is stretching their budgets with our inflation and everything else right now. So as we look for a way of removing PFAS, I hope we don't have to increase water bills because of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Robinson.
And sorry for dominating, but are there any opportunities for us to go back to the firms? I know, Scott, you had said that you didn't think that there was any potential to accelerate the schedule, but can we have those discussions with them? Is it a supply side? I know that supply side is causing lots of delays, but are there any opportunities for us to accelerate that construction to get that new plant online?
John, we can certainly have those discussions, but I think in the lines of taking a conservative approach and looking at having a true pilot study done by the time we put that online, those timeframes would almost coincide. I'm not sure that rushing a pilot is going to be in the best interest of our entire water system. I agree, expedited and very fast, but there's still some things we have to look at the effects on what they're going to do to different parts of the system. And that July timeframe would almost fit with what we can do with an expedited pilot. We can certainly have those discussions, and we can try to speed up our pilot as well. I think haste without waste would be good.
Yeah.
Commissioner Force.
I'd like to respond to Council President McElhaney's discussion. John, I know that if you have an in-home treatment device, you have to take care of it. In my home, I have to take care of my furnace filters. I have to take care of my water softening system. I mean, there are a number of things a homeowner or a property owner has to do to maintain their systems and their property. And if I'm serious about getting PFAS out of my drinking water and I buy a carbon filter or some kind of in-home treatment device, I think I'm obligated to take care of it. And that's my responsibility. So I understand what you're saying, but I wouldn't let that argument deter me from wanting to see whether or not we couldn't supply or fund or recommend in-home treatment systems for those people who want to put them in. And what I'm hearing and what Council President McElhaney is hearing is that a lot of people want to do something now. They don't want to wait 6 months or a year and a half or whatever it takes to do something at the source. They want the ability to do something in their home where the water is coming out of the tap.
Right. The floor is still open for folks. Is there information we need in order to start to come to a policy action on this? What do you need in order to be able to take action? Do you feel like you have information enough? Yes, Mr. Forsythe.
Well, I think we could certainly pass some kind of a motion here, perhaps the elements of which would be supporting the pilot study and encouraging speedy, prudent but speedy execution of that project, the exploration of technologies, and perhaps a survey of engineering firms who could offer us the professional advice that we need on what we might do at the treatment plant, exploration of other alternatives, as Joe has mentioned, blending water, perhaps shutting down 2 wells and going with the others, and some kind of supporting an in-home treatment system. Now, those might be a series of different motions, but
Yep.
I would think we could do something here.
Yep, okay. So I think maybe we start with the easy one. It seems like a gimme that we want to support the pilot program. So if there's a motion, I would entertain that. We have a motion by Commissioner Herbst and a second by... The motion is to support the pilot program, looking at various resins to see what will work best in the new facility. Second by Mr. Jean. Yeah, Mr. Robinson.
I'm looking for clarification. Does that include, I think we want to look at resins in all approaches, all appropriate approaches. And that would get into the evaluation of the Milwaukee. The
nanoporous.
Yes, and I don't want to limit us to one media, if you will.
Right. Yeah, I can assure you it will be several medias and combinations, and then we will also look into the nanoporous items and see how that can be incorporated. Okay.
Okay. Any other comments or questions or clarification needed on that motion? If not, all of those in favor of supporting the pilot program with various media and resins can signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we got the pilot supported. Next up, we talked about professional advice and exploration, getting that. Is there a motion that would make sense? And that I see you raising your finger, Commissioner Forrest.
Yes, I would propose that our Public Works Department do a survey of engineering firms nationwide who are dealing with this issue, and perhaps prepare a request for proposal to those who appear to be the most appropriate candidates. I don't know, others may want to add something to that.
Okay, we have a motion for a survey of firms who are dealing with PFAS nationwide, and then constructing an RFP and ensuring that they respond to that. Is there clarification or a second? Looks like we okay, we have a second from Commissioner Herbst. Mr. Robinson.
I would seek clarification to include regulatory agencies, because I think that we would benefit from, I know that the state of California is much farther along. We may be able to get some information from them. I know that ITRC, which is a interstate technical research available to state governments. And Kyle, I would call on you if you could reach out to some of those groups, if DNR could be a resource in plugging us into the regulatory agencies and some of those federal or national organizations that might yield some value to us in that and with that understanding.
I could reword the motion if the seconder will support me. I would say a survey of engineering firms, governmental agencies, educational institutions who are dealing with PFAS, with the consideration that we issue an RFP for engineering services for from appropriate candidates.
Does that sound good from the seconder? Okay, we have agreement. Yes, Mr. Dean.
I think literature review or review is appropriate, but I'm not sure issuing an RFP at this point in time would be appropriate until we have that data. Yeah.
Okay.
It just doesn't make sense to me. And I know staff is stretched, so it's going to be difficult to get that task done, but we still can.
Well, I'll amend to say they come back to this commission with a recommendation, whether that includes constructing an RFP or not. We decide at that time based on what the review has produced.
Okay. All right, so the motion is to survey engineering firms, regulatory agencies, and educational institutions who work with PFAS, survey what is available, and then come back to this body to determine what the next steps are with regards to maybe issuing an RFP, working with them. Does that characterize what we're talking about here? Okay. Any more conversation about that? Okay. All of those in favor of surveying the engineering firms, regulatory agencies, and educational institutions who work with PFAS removal, and then bringing that data back to us can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we're moving on. I just want to alert you, if you have any questions for Mr. Burton at the DNR, he does have a hard stop at 10:30, so that's 10 minutes from now. So just making sure that you get those questions answered. I'm sure they will be back if we need them. All right, next up, the other kind of part of a motion that I was hearing was exploration of plant options, maybe speeding it up. Is that what we were hoping to look into? I just wrote exploration of plant, so didn't quite get it all.
I would move that we direct staff to evaluate options, including acceleration of timing of plant construction, other operational changes such as blending of supplies to obtain the proposed DNR standards.
Okay. To evaluate options, including acceleration of the plant construction, blending water to get below the 20 parts per trillion. Anything I'm missing? And if there are any other options that maybe
It would be operational changes, including.
Operational changes or other operational changes. Okay. Do we have I see your finger, is that a second?
I'll second.
Okay,
I have
second by
a question.
Mr. Force. Yes, go ahead.
The question would be, so we evaluate some options like blending with other water sources, shutting down well 3. How do we know that there's been any impact? In other words, are we going to test for PFAS again at some point? Is
Yeah.
someone?
It sounds like that would be necessary in order to actually evaluate that.
Right.
Do we want to explicitly put that in this motion? Or is that another motion further down?
We will also be testing at that current time with the pilot as we move forward with that, so.
Maybe that's covered then.
Okay.
I think it's implicit.
Okay, good. All right, so the motion on the table is to direct staff to evaluate potential operational changes, including acceleration of the plant construction, blending water, or shutting down wells, or if there are other options that seem appropriate, we would love to hear them too, I think. Okay. All of those in favor can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. I know there was at least another one, I believe, related to filters for folks. Is there language that we want to throw out there as a motion? Or do we want to talk a little bit more about that before making a motion?
Well, I know there are a lot of questions, and John's questions were good ones. I don't know if we could make a motion to keep that option on the table and look at it in some way. I don't know how we execute that. When we did the water barrels, we just said, well, if somebody buys a water barrel for $70 or $100, we'll credit that on their water bill. That was pretty easy. This is not so easy.
Right. Mr. Robinson.
I would move that we direct staff to continue the evaluation of point of source treatment options for residential and businesses. Bring that report back in. I think we may need a special meeting on this item, given the sensitivity of it. Could we do that in 2 weeks?
Aren't we scheduled to meet in early March?
March 1, I think.
March 1?
Then March 1?
So that's 2 weeks from now, is
Yeah.
that good for people? So the motion that you proposed is directing staff to continue evaluating point of source remediation.
Treatment.
And when you say point of
Yeah,
source?
you mean in-home, John?
Yes, well, for residents and businesses.
Okay. Yeah,
And, that includes schools, because schools are going through this.
and daycare centers.
And daycare, and
So can I just seek clarification? We did just ask in homes, in businesses, and residential. Are we looking at those, for instance, mobile semi-trucks? We want to continue looking at that, filtering the water in or out of the plant, or are we mostly talking about filtration systems in individual places?
I'm talking about at home,
Okay.
at the business.
Okay. All right, so that's what we will direct staff to continue evaluating point of source filtration treatment options.
The issue is, I don't know how you estimate how many of our 10,000 users would want to do that, because that's going to determine the financial impact on the utility.
Yes, if there's not any opposition, I would like to allow Alder Killian to maybe give a comment. I know it's unusual, but I think that the policy bodies here should maybe interact a little.
Thank you, and I'll keep it brief, and it's to Mr. Force's questions. My understanding is that Wausau currently has roughly 17,000 households. Now, if we combine that, DHS provides a PDF which includes in-home methods to reduce PFAS, and they also have a link to certified products. Now, in terms of the exact quantity, these may reduce that. I think to some degree it's unknown, particularly with pitcher products, but not for point of use. That's not as much of a mystery. So if we were to find, the quantity of households coupled with a cost of a system at home, then I think what we will find is that we have immediate, and I will say that one more, immediate federal funds on the table right now. So we could spend ARPA funding to cover every household in town immediately if the council would pass that. And if it pleases the commission, I would just ask, because in my district there are 2 HUD qualified census tracts, which means that there's a lot of low-income neighborhoods. And if it would please the commission, may I request that you hold such a meeting to explore this a little sooner than weeks, perhaps days, because I think the question is, particularly with pregnant and nursing mothers, if households do not feel comfortable with the levels in their water right now, there really, realistically, for some households, the money just isn't there right now. So if there was some eligible federal funding and there'd be an opportunity just to move it along a little bit sooner, I think that would be really positive.
Thank you. So maybe along with the directive to have staff evaluate, we could request that Finance Committee consider costs along with us in parallel. Mr. Robinson.
I would hope that I know that in Peshtigo, in town of Campbell, that the Wisconsin Environmental Repair Fund was accessed for funding. I think we ought to, Kyle's still on, and I know it's a different program, but we ought not lose sight of the fact that there may be some funding through the DNR and there's real potential funding.
Yeah, John, thanks for that. We looked at that immediately. However, our rules and our 738, which you're probably very familiar with from your past career, doesn't allow us to use the Environmental Repair Fund to supply water to public utilities, which is why we're...
It's those private wells, is that what the difference is?
Private.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the table directing staff to continue evaluating point of source treatment for residents, businesses, et cetera. Is there anything we'd like to add to that? Okay. All right, so all of those in favor of directing staff to continue evaluating point of source treatment for residents and businesses, and every water user can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes. What's next? Mr. Robinson.
I think that the comments that we've heard from several people was concerns over the public on how this impacts us. So I think we need to continue to develop educational material and educational opportunities. So maybe if we could, at our, between now and the next meeting, develop that outreach plan, working with the state and trying to get additional information out there. I know that there are approved treatment devices that are available now, and I think those are on both the state and the local health department website. But if we can just look at how do we continue that outreach in providing education to the citizens, because I'm getting those questions every day.
Mr. Morse.
Mayor, I would add that I'm dealing with websites on my own with my own issues. I know how difficult it is, but I would urge that PFA information, like the kind that John and Alderman Killian has talked about, receive prominent display on our website so that it's not difficult to find it. It could be on the home page with a link. It's an important enough topic right now that I think it would warrant a special position on the home page where you could just click that and link to this information that we're talking about here and not have to scale through all the drop downs to try to find it.
Yep, you'll be pleased to know that that is the case right now, so thank you. Do we need a motion for continuing to develop the educational materials, or is it assumed that we're going to keep doing that? I think it's assumed. Thank you. What's next? Are there more discussions that need to?
Okay, good.
Next meeting?
Okay, we can discuss the next meeting. Sounds like March 1st is the next meeting we have scheduled. Do we want something sooner than that?
I would just urge that the March 1 meeting be held at 7 p.m. instead of 1:30.
Okay, that is something that we can look into. Let me just check it right now to see if there is anything on our calendar already for that date. All right, there is an Economic Development Committee meeting that night, but I believe that's 5:15 to 7, so we could, if this body wishes, move our meeting to 7 p.m. following, or maybe 7:15 following the Economic Development Committee meeting. Is that the wishes of this body? I see a thumbs up, I see heads nodding, I see a question from Mr. Robinson.
I don't know that you always get great attendance at 7 I know it conflicts with others, sometimes that end of the day, that 5 to 7 time slot seems to get people before they, on their way home from work or others. I don't know what is the better time frame, but.
If you want, we can ask if Economic Development Committee would consider flip-flopping. We can maybe do that and follow up with you on email if that works. Okay.
People don't come out at night.
Yeah? Okay. Is there anything else we need to discuss? Otherwise, I would take a motion to adjourn. I have a motion by Jean, and I have a second by Herbst. All in favor can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.